We're going to be working on this LB7 Duramax today. Been chasing some fuel pressure issues on it. Doesn't look like it's the injectors. We replaced the regulator, the bypass valve, and installed a lift pump on this. These are all things that we were going to do anyways. Figured we'd do them one at a time just to rule things out, but turns out we're still having some fuel pressure issues, not getting commended pressure, so we're pretty sure it's the CP3 pump. So we've gone ahead and grabbed a reman pump from Thoroughbred Diesel. Carries a 2-year warranty, a lesser expensive option than buying new at $1,500–$1,800. So we're going to give that a whirl. In order to do this, I've already taken off this hose. Sorry it didn't start there, but that's just 2 hose clamps, and you can pull this hose off. Essentially, the C3P, the CP3 pump is basically right below all of this. Faces forward. It's held in by 4 bolts from the front. So what we have to do is kind of unbury ourselves here. So we're going to take this snout off. That's a little bit tricky. I'm going to show you how to do that here in a minute. But there's 3 bolts. That bottom bolt down there is a pain. You got to have some swivels. So we're going to take this snout off the turbo. We're going to take this coolant crossover pipe off here. We're probably not going to release the refrigerant and the AC compressor, but we're going to undo the 4 bolts that hold it so that we can kind of swing it out of the way. We may need to pull the alternator. We'll see if we've got room there. And then down here in the front, there's some tricks you can do to not have to remove all these pulleys, but they're really not that difficult to remove. You have to remove this and that pulley just to give yourself some room. You can get around it with the right extensions and swivels, but we probably we'll just remove them. We'll kind of see how that goes. So once we get this unburied, we'll probably have to take the manifold off here. So just make sure you grab all the gaskets you need ahead of time. So I've got the gaskets that hold this manifold down, this gasket. There's O-rings that go on the front of that pump that hold it in. There's an O-ring that holds that seals this crossover pipe into the thermostat housing down here. Really, this is a time-consuming job, but it's really not that difficult as far as, capabilities. You do need a good set of sockets, extensions, swivels. You will need some swivels. If you don't have swivels, this is going to be very difficult, maybe impossible. So just make sure you got swivels and stuff. But yeah, there's 4 bolts down here, and I'll show those when we get there. But first step is we're going to pull this hose, give us some room. We're going to pull this hose. This is just a PCV breather. We're going to get that out of the way so that we can get down in here, and then we'll work on getting this off first. This is kind of step 1. That'll give us breathing room to be able to get to everything else. So we're going to be pulling coolant hoses at this point. So this hose, if you're just in here doing something small, this is going to leak very little coolant. So you could pull this off and leak a little bit. But since we're going to be pulling this and the crossover pipe, we're going to want to go ahead and drain the coolant. Of course, always disconnect your battery and things like that for safety. But yeah, we're going to go ahead and drain the coolant. That's right here on the front passenger corner. Get yourself a clean bucket, get underneath here, and there is a little petcock on the radiator. Let's see if I can get it on video here. But basically down here in the right hand corner of the radiator, there is a winged petcock that you can unscrew slowly, and it will leak out into your clean bucket. So if you're saving the coolant, get a clean bucket. If you're replacing it, then obviously it doesn't matter. So we're going to go ahead and drain the coolant. We're going to let it drain slowly. If you pull that petcock all the way out, it's just going to make a giant mess. So just let it drain slowly while you're working on some other stuff, or go get yourself some lunch or something. And then we can start pulling these coolant manifolds and get into the turbo snout and everything like that. So drain the coolant first and we'll go from there. So the coolant's drained. Went ahead and got this off. I'm just gonna leave it attached to this other side. This breather hose goes down in there. There's just a squeezy clamp on it. Goes on that nipple right there. If you want to take it off the other side, you can. You don't have to. I took this. This is just a 10 millimeter here that holds this temperature guy on, just to give me a little bit of room. So now you can see there's two 10 millimeters right there that hold this snout on, and then the last one is down there, if you can kind of see it. So that's the one that's hard to get to. Depending on how tight it is, you might have to crack it loose with a long 10 millimeter wrench, but you can get down there with a swivel. Sorry, my light's not behaving very well, but you can get down there with a swivel, 1/4 inch swivel on a ratchet, and get it out of the way mostly. So once that's out of the way, then we'll have room. We can pull this the coolant crossover. There's a 10 millimeter that holds it right there. Sorry, my lighting is rough today. 10 millimeter that kind of holds it in. There's an O-ring. It's gonna fight you a little bit coming out, but and then you got this bracket over here. There's one. I think there's just one on that. I think, okay, so usually there's one here and one kind of back through there that you have to hit with a swivelly, but this one's missing luckily, so I won't have to do that. And then you can just take this clamp off here, and this whole crossover pipe will come out of the way. This harness, pretty annoying harness. It's held on with a slide there and a slide over here. You can kind of lift it up. Once you lift it up, it has quite a bit of movement. You can kind of move it kind of out of the way. We're not going to completely disassemble that harness. We're going to work around it because it goes over here to this computer, snakes down around the motor, and if I don't have to take it off completely, I don't want to. So, but that's where we're at. So we're going to get this snout off. Kind of a pain, but I wanted to show you how I'm getting this bottom bolt over here. So if you have hand tools, that's fine. This just makes things a little bit easier. But I've got my 1/4 inch. You can see it right there. It's on a swivel. I'm on the bolt. Obviously, I'm going to seat it a little bit more. These aren't super tight, so you should be able to zap it out of there. You just take it out slow. Your swivel's not going to be happy because it's almost at 90 degrees, but it'll come out. So to get this crossover pipe out, like I said, there's a bolt here. There's probably a bolt on the other side of yours if it's never been taken out. And then I take out this bolt here that holds this harness on so that it gives us some room. And then there is a bolt that goes right here that basically holds this in and seals the O-ring to this thermostat housing. So now that it's off, you're gonna kind of have to fight these harness plugs here. So you're gonna want to kind of come up so that you can clear those harness plugs as much as you can. And then while you're kind of up at that angle, you kind of have to work this back and forth until you get that O-ring to pop loose, and then you can snake this out. So it's a little bit tricky. It takes a little bit of finesse. Be careful when you're doing this not to bash into these main harness plugs. This would be bad if you damage these plugs. So just take some finesse, take 2 hands, wiggle it. If you want to, you can get a big screwdriver and very gently pry between that eyelet and that threaded hole in the housing, and that can help you. but it's gonna feel like it's hung up, and that's because it's stuck on the O-ring. So you're just gonna kind of have to work it, and it'll come out of there. So crossover pipe is out. Now we can actually see the pump down here. So I want to show you what we're dealing with a little bit. So that's the pump right there. That's the regulator that has the electrical plug on it. There's a few hard lines that we're gonna have to deal with here in a minute, and a few soft lines. So, sorry, my camera keeps focusing weird. So there's this distribution block here, this fuel distribution block. This new shiny piece, oops, excuse me. This little shiny piece in there is the pressure relief valve. I've already replaced that. This truck has a lot of miles on it. Didn't want to chase it or worry about it. You don't have to take this big one off here to get this apart. You can if you want to, if you're replacing that line or whatever. But both sides of this come apart. So one of them goes to this soft line that you can take off, and the other one comes over here, kind of underneath this. There's another fuel. You can kind of see, it's not focusing, but right down there, there is a banjo bolt right there. If you take that banjo bolt off, oh, there we go. Now we can see it. Then you don't have to take this big bolt out. You could do it either way. A lot of people struggle with this just because there's not a lot of room here to get this backed out correctly. But once you do that, there's two nuts that are on these studs here. You'll have to undo all these hard lines that go into this manifold. There's 3 of them. So you've got 2 on this side, 1 over there, and then you have your, I think it's your main fuel line that's attached to this bracket here. We'll have to get that loose. It comes over here to the fuel injection controls here. So the computer, it goes to this, but there's a clamp, soft hose with a clamp there. So we'll probably undo that and try to unsnake this whole hard line out of here. But this is kind of the more complicated part of this, is getting this fuel system out. But you do have to undo these 3 threaded fittings here, and then you can just unplug that pressure sensor there and leave it on. And then we can get that out of the way, and then we can start working on our Y pipe, and then, like I said before, AC compressor, alternator, we'll move those out of the way. You don't need to discharge this, you can just lay it out of the way, but that'll give us the room that we need to get down in here. I may or may not need to take this off. If I don't need to take it off, I won't. That's the thermostat housing. If I do need to take it off just to get that little extra inch or so of clearance right there, then I will. It's not a big deal. So that's where we're at. So we're gonna start cracking these lines loose off of this fuel system. Not a bad idea to replace these soft lines while you're in here. I went ahead and grabbed them from the dealer, along with new, anytime you're taking these banjos off, replace these gaskets, these crush washers. They come in a little set like this, and the same thing with the one under here. Make sure you're replacing those. You don't want leaks under here. That'd be bad, cause a whole other set of problems. So, all right, well, I'm gonna keep taking things apart, and we'll check back in. All right, so I went ahead and pulled the alternator, pulled the AC compressor to give myself some more room. Over here, I went ahead and disconnected these main harness plugs. Just be careful not to get dirt and whatnot inside of these, but went ahead and disconnected these, slid them off of their little brackets. That was a little bit annoying. These brackets have a little spring clip, so you kind of have to get underneath them with a little flathead, and then you can slide those back. But that allowed me to get a lot of movement out of this harness, so I'm going to leave the harness in place. Otherwise, I just undid some plugs over there to give me some room, but that'll give us plenty of room to be able to work in here without having to disassemble this whole thing. So the next task is, and the reason that I took all that off originally, is we're chasing this hard line here that's attached to those studs. Comes underneath this bracket. We want to avoid taking this bracket out because it's kind of a whole thing. And it comes over here to these soft lines. There's a nut that holds it right there. And the biggest thing is back here on your feed lines, there's a 10mm that holds this into a little clamp. I'm disconnecting that, and I will probably end up disconnecting this here. But that gives us quite a bit of movement, so I think that's going to get us pretty close to being able to get this up and over those studs, and over here get this hose off. And I'll probably replace this hose while I'm in here. It looks a little bit old and tired, so we'll get that off and get this line snaked out of here. Once that line's out of here, then I think the rest will be pretty straightforward. So to get a little bit extra room here, I went ahead and unbolted the fuel injection computer. So there's 3 bolts. There's one, and then there's another down low there, and then there's one over there. So I undid that, and then I'm going to undo these plugs right here. These are a little bit weird. So what you have to do is you have to slide these locks out. So if you have a little flathead, you want to be real careful, but you kind of work these back and forth and you slide them out like that, and then once they're out, the plug will come off, and there's one in each direction, so you have to go this way, then this way. Okay, so we're able to get this fitting off right here, this hose that goes to the ECU over here, and or the fuel injection ECU, I guess. And that gave us quite a bit of room just to pop this up here. I went ahead and I was thinking I could just lay this whole thing out of the way, and I probably could have, but I didn't feel super comfortable with the way that it was going to bend some of the lines. So I kind of changed my strategy. I'm going to go ahead and leave that third fitting attached over there. Just get this hard line up and over those studs. This is still loose enough that we can move it around if needed. But I did go ahead and pop that big banjo. Make sure you get a new crush washer for that. And then this line, still had to take that small one off, but that gave me quite a bit of room that I can just swing that up and out of the way. I think that between that and this harness being out of the way, that we'll be able to get enough room to get that pump out and in. Still not sure if I'm gonna have to take this thermostat housing off or not. We'll see. I'm just gonna leave this hard line kind of in place because it tucks right underneath this bracket. I'm trying to avoid taking that bracket off. We'll see. I might get myself in a pickle here and have to take that bracket and this thermostat housing off, but I think with having that bridge out of the way, it'll give me enough maneuverability to get out of there. The bridge wasn't hard to get. Just make sure you got a swivel and a 1/4 inch tin, and you're able to get all four of those. It slides right out of there. The bottom 2 holes on each side are notched, so it just slides right up. So anyway, so now is the time that we're going to start getting at the front of this motor here. So I'm going to move this harness back up here so it's not in my way down here, but basically you've got, so it's not that first bolt, it's that one that goes through kind of that edge flange, and then there's one down below right there too. So we're going to get those 2 on this side, and then over here we got one right there kind of behind this oil straight back right there, and then I don't know if I can catch the other one on video. It's basically the same situation as the other side. I actually think there's one up high. I'm not gonna be able to get it on video, guys. You'll feel it though. It's not that one, it's that one right there, and then there's one, oh, there you go, you can see them both right there in that shot. We got our 4 bolts out. I'll try to show you here real quick. There's a piece of the harness in the way there, but those 2 out. And these 2. Now that bottom one's probably not going to come out all the way because of that crossover pipe. That's okay as long as it's kind of loose and floating in there. It'll be alright. Now the pump itself, we're going to try to pull it out. We'll see if we got enough room, if we've made enough room here for ourselves. It's going to be kind of jammed in there, so you're going to have to wiggle it and maybe very carefully try to pry it out, because it's got an O-ring that's been in there for, in this one's case, about 20 years. So we're going to try to get that thing to pop out of there real nice and easy. Alright, so we got it separated. Basically, it took a little bit of wiggling. It has to kind of come straight out, so you can't really put too much of a bind on it one direction or another. So right down through this hole, I was able to get a big pry bar kind of right behind one of the ears, try to walk it out, and then I went to this side, did the same thing, kind of went back and forth till it popped. So in the meantime, you just grab the back of it and kind of wiggle up and down so it doesn't get bound vertically. Now that it's out, so basically we're going to be fighting all of our previous work here. So we've got our fuel line up and out of the way. We got our wiring harness that we're going to try to tuck up and out of the way as much as we can. And this is loose, so this will give us a little bit, but basically this pump, from my understanding, is going to have to come out gear down. So we're going to have to pull, we're going to have to pick it up from the back. It's too heavy for me to do one-handed, so I can't film it, but we're going to have to pick it up from the back and try to finagle it past these studs right here into basically a vertical position so that you're lifting straight up, gear down, to get that out. So I'm going to try that. If that's not the case, I will let you know. Alright, so we got her out. It was a pain. It has to be rotated just ever so slightly in the right direction to come out of there. I had to actually remove this, and I couldn't get it up and over the studs with that line and everything in place. So what I actually did, saved me a bunch of time, I wish I would have done it earlier, is those studs come out. They're actually an E-Torx head. If you got an E-Torx set with you, great. If not, a 6mm 12 side will take it out. So I hit that with a 6mm. Those studs came right out. That whole unit fell out of the way, and I was able to get it out of there. You kind of have to start vertically, and then as it's coming up and passes these studs, it has to tilt about 45 degrees, and then it will completely do a 180 and come out. So harness in place and everything just kind of tucked out of the way like we did. So I didn't have to remove this this deal. I don't think that it would have really given me any extra room, honestly. So yeah, so we got our pump right here, our reman pump in the box right there. So we got to switch basically this whole front portion over this, where these bolts go in, and all of it, and the gear and everything, got to switch over to the new pumps. Alright, so this is the new reman pump, obviously the old pump. So what we're going to do is zap this nut off with an impact. We'll move this gear and everything off, and then this plate here has to get moved. So on the back side, there's these bolts here. Look at it straight down, you can see them. So there is 3, looks like 1, 2, 3 that hold that front piece on. That's all going to be moved over to the new pump. And then this nipple here and this nipple here have to also be moved over. So we're gonna zap this all apart and move them over. New pump comes with a regulator already on it, and so that's good. Unfortunately, I just replaced this regulator. I'm trying to verify the fuel pressure issue, but alright, so Thoroughbred Diesel has a real good video about how to get this apart. If you want to skip over and check that out, I'll put a link in the description. But essentially, they want you to grab a strap wrench, or I didn't have a rubber strap wrench here. I'm at the shop I'm working at, so I used an oil filter wrench, but you're just going to put a little bit of pressure on the gear itself, while simultaneously you're going to thread this nut on just about flush so you don't mess up the threads or anything. And then preferably with a dead blow or a non-marring hammer, brass or something, while you're holding this gear with your strap wrench, you're going to give this some love taps right here. Bam, 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 and this gear will come loose. Now that's what I did. And it took me about 3 whacks and it came right off, and threads and everything are okay. And then to get this piece off, essentially what you're going to do is you're going to rotate this around until you can get in a couple of these threaded holes. You can get a little gap there, and you can slide a washer, a little piece of metal underneath. Kind of want to get it like about that, so that you can get 2 opposite ends that have some space under them. You're going to slide a washer or a piece of metal underneath, and then you're going to use your bolts here and thread them in. Now the reason for the washer or a little piece of metal underneath is just so you don't mar up the housing where this is going to screw into. So we're going to get a little buffer here, probably a little washer, and put it underneath 2 of these ends, thread this in, and back this off. So here's a little bit better close-up of what I'm talking about here. So we've basically just slid some washers right underneath where those bolts are going to make contact to protect the housing. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take turns going in, a turn or so on each side, back and forth, and until this lifts up and separates. So it's just being held on by this O-ring here, so it shouldn't take too much pressure. But yeah, we're just gonna get our ratchet, and you probably don't want to do this with an impact gun because you'll just go too far. But go ahead and just do it with a ratchet back and forth, and it'll pop right up. So we got that off. Came up just like expected. Nothing too crazy. If it starts to get a little bit wonky on you, just use your non-mar hammer to kind of tap it back straight, and then wiggle it off of there. We went ahead and cleaned it up as good as we could. Make sure that there's no debris on the inside of here where our O-ring is going to ride. I'm going to go ahead and just oil up this O-ring with a little bit of motor oil, and we're going to set it on there. And then we're going to set our gear on there and get it all torqued back down. Alright, so that just sets on there. Make sure to line up your back holes. There's 3 of them. You kind of have to put even force. I put my palm on each side and just kind of gave it like a little push, and it popped on there. Make sure your O-ring's oiled, and it should slide on there. Now as far as the gear goes, the side that has the larger protrusion is going to go down onto the pump. So basically we're going to put that there. We're going to put our washer on, our nut on, and then we'll use the same technique we did before as far as holding the gear, and we'll torque this down. Put the torque spec here on the screen. And then make sure to put your bolts back in the backside with the spacers just like it came out. Make sure everything's tight, and then we'll move all the nipples and everything over, and she's ready for install. Alright, so we got everything switched over. The new pump is all torqued down. These nipples are moved. They have a little crush washer behind them. Make sure you get those at the dealer when you are getting ready to do yours, so that it can seal correctly. This is the regulator. They've got this little sleeve on it to protect it. I think I'm going to leave that on until it's in and mounted, just so that we don't risk getting something in that plug-in. And then I'll probably put that back on the core when it goes back. So it's all back together. I did get a new one of these O-rings to replace the old one back there. So new O-rings on. It's oiled up. So theoretically, this thing's ready to go back in. I'm going to take a little bit of time, clean up the valley a little bit if I can. It's pretty bad in there from all the years, but we're going to get this, try to get this snaked back in there kind of the same way that it came out. I think we're going to have to put it in head first, so gear down, kind of 45 degrees, and kind of wiggle it until it drops in place. Alright, so it's down in there. It's not seated yet. You can see the O-ring and the gear is still out. But yeah, basically kind of had to go gear down, and then slowly, kind of like as it's going down, you kind of have to rotate it, and you got to shimmy it back and forth to get over these studs. But going down, going in, a lot easier than coming out, because you got the weight of the pump helping you along the way. So you just kind of got to find that right combination. Once it's down in there, basically we're gonna do our best to we gotta line it up just right, so that those bolt holes come through. It should kind of find its own home, but there is that gear that it's got to set into. So I'm gonna sit for a second and wiggle this around, and then see if I can't get one bolt started. Alright, she's all installed. Basically got it as close as I could, and then I threaded 2 bolts diagonally, one up here and then that one that we left in down on the other side, and I worked them back and forth, a couple turns on each, until it fell in. You're fighting the O-ring and the gear. If it feels like it's binding up and it's fighting you, stop and reassess. But you should be able to just walk it in back and forth, and then it will fall into its place, and you'll feel it fall in, and then from there you can just throw the bolts in and tighten her down. I'm not going to make this video super long, so that's pretty much it. The rest of it is reverse of removal to reinstall everything. Just make sure you're replacing hoses that look suspect, and make sure that you're putting new gaskets and O-rings in places that you touched. Put it all back together, and depending on how your fuel system is, if you've got an air dog system, it should pretty much self-bleed. If not, you can use, as many of you may know, you can use that bleeder screw. Sorry, my angle's pretty rough. But you can use that bleeder screw right there on top of your fuel filter housing to bleed the air out of the system while you're priming it with the button. Or if you've got an electric lift pump, turn the key on, let it cycle, and crack that open until you see fuel, and then you should be good to fire it up. And check for leaks. Always check for leaks. Check for leaks on all the pieces that you touched, all the fittings, all the hose clamps. I would even recommend making sure that everything's safe and out of the way. Leave your turbo inlet and the reservoir off. Unplug your mass airflow sensor. It should be already unplugged. And give it a quick fire. Make sure nothing's going to get stuck in the turbo, obviously, but fire it up. It'll run without all that on it. And check for leaks for real quick. Make sure that there's no leaks underneath all this stuff that you just touched. If it's good, then shut it down, put it all the way back together, and run it. So hopefully this helped you. Hopefully it was a little bit more complete of a walkthrough. We didn't end up taking None of these brackets off up here. Removing those studs on that distribution block was probably the best thing that I did. I wish I would have done that at the very beginning. I was fighting it the whole time. Just remove those studs, and I probably could have gotten away with leaving this attached. Had I just removed those studs, I probably could have lifted it all together. Hindsight's 2020, but hopefully this helps you. Thank you. And please subscribe, like, share, helps me out.